We're going to connect your car remotely, and all you have to do is just consent, and that's it.
Are retailers using that data enough at the moment, do you think?
And then the big question, which it's on everyone's mind, is like, well, who's going to own those platforms? Here's what this means for you, and here's a personalized way of understanding your data.
Mm-hmm.
This is something we're looking at a lot as well.
Peter Wilson, welcome to this episode of the Drivetime podcast live at Move 26. It's really great to have you in our little Porsche studio.
Great to be here.
Now, I've been coming to Move for about 3 years, and I think you have too. I came to your stand last year and I saw you do a keynote. We were talking about the silent disco last year. It's not silent this year. There's noise everywhere. But I was really curious about the work that you do in automotive, and I wanted you on the podcast a year ago. So I'm really happy that we've got you here this year. And just a little bit about you, Peter, and how you founded Volteras, how you got into automotive, and then we're going to move on to what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So it was a bit of a chance coincidence. I was finishing my master's degree in LSE, and then I spoke with my co-founder Alexander. I was introduced to him after my degree. We had a coffee together. It was like the end of 2020, started 2021, before the whole Tesla hype and EV thing came into fruition. And then he was like, do you want to do something in this space? And then we were kind of brainstorming. We talked about potentially doing like a charging app, so like an EMSP. So we'd show people like where the charges were around Europe. And then we began to do that. Then we uncovered when we were building that there was a lot of issues like underneath us in the infrastructure layer. So in order to build these like great apps, you have to have great infrastructure, which is built on top of.
Yes.
So we began to understand that some businesses were kind of like reverse engineering the data from the car manufacturers, which means that they'd actually go around the car manufacturer and scrape the data without the permission of the automaker. Then we began to say, okay, well, that's not really sustainable. Perhaps we should work with the automakers rather than against them. So we began to move into the API space, which is what we did today. So we're partnered with over like 35 auto manufacturers around Europe and North America, cover about like 90% of connected cars on roads. And we enable businesses to get data from the cars directly through the OEM APIs through us. So that's how kind of it all started in our genesis.
So talking about the APIs and the data that you're taking from the vehicle rather than scraping it, which is not only unsustainable, I dare say it's not quite legal. It's not really allowed.
Gray area.
A bit of a grey area. So talking about the APIs, and which data kind of areas are you looking to take from the vehicle or to take from the OEM and then share more broadly, and how do you share that data? Who uses it?
So like the kind of value add that we do is the 2 or 3 things. So the first one is a company can do what we're doing, but they'd have to go to like each of the individual manufacturers, do contracts with them, integrate, and it just takes several years. And we've raised $50 million so far. It's quite a lot of money to do that. So you can do that, or you can go through us and get access to 35 OEMs in 4 weeks. And that's how long it takes to get access to everything. The second is that the benefit of using us as well is that we standardize all the data. So behind the scenes, what people don't see is that Mercedes may call it like state of charge, BMW may call it battery level. There's different terminology, different speeds, the data, different ways of like what they offer and don't offer. So we simplify all that or filter it down for the customer. And it means that their engineering team can integrate faster. There's not as much data engineering work on their side to do. And then it's like a very easy to use interface on behalf of that. Then, yeah, so to your point around the use cases, we pull whatever the automaker does. So it's everything from mileage to location data, charging data, fuel levels, maintenance, DTC, fault codes, all the kind of fun and wonderful stuff around fleets.
So, and then once you've got the data, then who makes the most of the data that you've got? We say people can plug into you and access that data. Who gets the benefit out of the stuff that you're collecting? Yeah.
So historically, fleets, for example, if you're a rental company, a leasing company, you would have paid quite like a large sum for a hardware device. Then you have to install it across all your cars. Then you have to pull the data into a platform and so on. So the big shift historically, what's happened is that the hardware device was external, which is plugged into the vehicle. Now it's internal. So from around 2018 onwards, most cars are connected cars. So they end up like iPhones. And essentially you can like send and receive data from the vehicle through the car without having to integrate or plug in a hardware device. So that's what we do. And then from that, you're then able to connect the vehicles remotely, which saves fleet managers and leasing companies like a huge amount of time, because it means that they're not paying for the hardware costs, which can range from like around 30 to 40 pounds per hardware device multiplied by thousands of vehicles. It's quite a lot of money. And also it's much cheaper to organize and run this because you don't have to interrupt the driver. So you don't have to say to them, we're going to send you a hardware device, plug it in and do it. You can just say to them, we're going to connect your car remotely, and all you have to do is just consent, and that's it. So it's a very like seamless process to get into other cars.
And if it's a fleet vehicle, then the consent almost is like expected up front. You would think that you were going to do that anyway, because it's not my car, it's your car and I'm driving it for work. So how did you sort of come about this kind of idea? What was your background into tech in the first place?
I was doing my master's degree in information systems at LSE. And to be honest, this was the only thing I'm kind of good at. So I just decided, well, I might as well keep on going down the entrepreneurship path. I was working on a Google spinoff for a couple of months, and then I met my co-founder, and then I decided to go full time into this.
And then just went for it.
Yeah, it was around like COVID or so. So I had a lot more spare time because not many people were doing many things at that point. And then
I think COVID was one of those points when people had a lot of time to kind of think about, what do I do? What am I going to do? It's like, it was a really odd time. People either shut things completely or, there was a total kind of rethink and a pivot, wasn't there? So now that you're here, I mean, obviously you've been coming here for the last 3 years, and this is, I think, such a great event to see other innovators. And there's the Startup Village where you've got a whole host of great ideas. I think a couple of years ago, it was full of people that had like things you could put into curbs to allow charging to happen. I haven't been around the Startup Village yet this year, so I'm not quite sure what's hot down there. Do you kind of keep an eye on that space as an entrepreneur?
Well, yeah, I mean, the great thing for us is because we're a platform, a lot of these businesses will be the types of customers that kind of build on top of us.
Yes.
So we're very aware of the themes and trends that are happening in the industry. I'd say like 2 or 3 years ago, the whole trend was like that cars could be connected remotely without hardware. So that's where we fit in. Then I think last year there's like a ton of EV related stuff. And then obviously with different headwinds and so on, the US, maybe that's not as big anymore. And then I think this year obviously there's a lot of autonomous vehicle stuff, which is like super exciting.
Yeah.
But I think it's a funny event where you can literally see the themes happening throughout the industry in real time by just looking around and seeing what's popular and what's not.
Yeah. I think for me, I've heard more about data this year than anything else.
Yeah.
That has been, and it's surprising, I think, but actually not surprising, because for AI to be successful, you need to have a robust, reliable data source. So I think that's probably where we've heard about AI projects failing, but that's because they haven't been plugged in. So there's been like, oh, okay, let's step back a little bit. What's the data source? And how do we then take that and do something with it? So just thinking about that, are you now, I suppose you're very in demand because you have so much of a robust and reliable data source. So the use cases will just kind of continue to evolve. What's in your kind of near future at the minute? What are you thinking about? What's exciting for you?
So we do kind of traditional use cases like predictive maintenance for fleet management. So we help like fleets understand not only the alerts in their vehicles, let's say a puncture has occurred, but we also show them the rate at which the puncture is happening so they can infer if it's like a fast puncture or a slow puncture, because these have different remediation steps. So for example, it's a fast puncture and you're driving on a highway, you're going to want to alert the driver to that so that maybe the AA can come like immediately and prepare for that. If it's a slow puncture, you want to redirect them towards a service station or where they can actually get it fixed in due time. And they're also two very different cost structures for the fleet and the driver as well. So that's like one of the things we're building. We're moving into like the intelligence layer, which is kind of a bunch of jargon for just building on top of what we have with the data. That's an example of one of them, but the other one would be just like understanding how the data relates to one another. For example, there's some stuff that you can do if you understand the charging cycles of a vehicle and you understand how the person is charging, meaning if they're using fast or slow chargers, you can understand the battery state of health. So you can understand the degradation of the car, which is linked to how much it's worth at the end of, let's say, a 2 or 3 year lease. So a lot of leasing companies are interested in understanding the degradation because they want to know if their CAP and HPI values are correct or not, and if the car is worth as much as they think it will be worth. So
I think when I saw your stand a year ago, I came to speak to your colleague and I was like, tell me what you're doing. And when they were showing me what you do and the data, it was that bit that I think I was most excited about, because we operate with retailers who are obviously going to be dealing with used EVs, and their consumers are looking at used EVs. And actually, a used EV at the minute is a really good decision, because you're getting a fairly low residual value, but it's affordable for most consumers, actually on a lease as well. But the ones that is sticking point could be, what's the battery health like? And you never think about that with an engine. You think, oh, he's got X number of miles, not how hard it's been driven. So I think there is this really odd kind of behavior shift with EVs. I don't know how we can maybe reduce that anxiety, but the data that you have gives someone that peace of mind, because you've got that kind of almost health check. Are retailers using that data enough at the moment, do you think?
I think that it's becoming more normalized. I mean, part of the issue is not that people don't understand that battery health is valuable. It's just it's very difficult to calculate due to the fact that all the automakers don't have standardized data like capabilities. Some of them are better than others. But there are regulation coming in across Europe, for example, to mandate that the person has a battery passport. So we're seeing a lot of automakers releasing like battery state of health as a data point, which means that they're calculating it and verifying it on their behalf. Now, this is very nice because it means that when you go to resell your car, you can say, well, it's not me saying that Tesla is at 90%, 7% battery health. It's actually Tesla themselves saying that this is it. And it makes the whole thing much faster. And then we're also looking at, it's not just battery state of health, which matters at the end of the cycle of the car. It's also the vehicle health in total, which we look at maintenance cycles for. So how many times has the car had issues? Is it the case it has recurring fault codes or issues that come up? These will affect like the person's view of the vehicle if they're buying a good battery, but maybe there's like recurring problems with the vehicle that will depress the value of the vehicle. So having those two in kind of as a corollary is quite important as well.
And you've got that data there as well. So you kind of got it in front of you. So that's, it's good to kind of know that it's there and you can use it, but also kind of what do you do with it next? So thinking about kind of what's next for Volteras, what are you working on now? What's kind of on the roadmap for you guys?
We've got a couple of secrets we'll be releasing in the next couple of weeks, but I think that the next stage of where all this goes is not just giving people data and here's thousands of data points across all your vehicles, you go figure that out. We'd actually like to help them understand, well, here's what this means. And I think that's what you're seeing as trends across AI industries in general. They're sitting on top of all the data sets, which are usually proprietary, and then saying, here's what this means for you. And here's a personalized way of understanding your data. So I think this is something we're looking at a lot as well. We'll be releasing it with a couple of fleets this summer, and then hopefully doing a showcase for our product towards the end of Q3.
Nice. So hopefully you can tell us all about that when it's ready. And that's the thing, isn't it? We're drowning in data. You talk about standardizing data so that people can ingest it. There is so much data coming out of every single source, whether it's the vehicle or, there is so much data coming out of everywhere, from the consumer activity to everything else. It's then knowing what to do with it. I think we're kind of in danger of just being sort of, swamped by it. But actually, once you know what to do with it and what that data is telling you, you can then make some informed decisions about what to do next. So, so very exciting. And then in terms of the rest of the show, you've got a couple of speaking slots. You've got your keynote tomorrow, or you're on a panel tomorrow. And who are you on a panel with?
Jaguar Land Rover 6th. It's going to be an interesting one. We're talking about software-defined vehicles like SDVs, and I guess they're heading it from different angles, from the leasing side with 6th, from the OEM side with JLR, or kind of the data connectivity side with us. I think it's going to be an interesting talk. I mean, also the kind of theme of this year, I think, is autonomous vehicles. So it'll be interesting to see how all those add up. I think for the leasing side, it's really interesting because a lot of these leasing companies are the ones who are actually working directly with ride-hailing companies now to give them the supply. And then, as you can see with the car behind us with Wave and Stellantis, a lot of the OEMs are making like a huge push to make their vehicles autonomous. And then the big question, which it's on everyone's mind, is like, well, who's going to own those platforms? And then also, if it's the case that you and I can have a Tesla and do full self-driving mode, and put it out there and start renting it when we're here at the show, well, like, what platform does that sit on? How does that work logistically? Are we all going to be renting our cars during the day and driving them in the evening? So it's very interesting.
I don't know whether that many people want to be driving. It's a really interesting one, isn't it? So the industry has gone through, we talked about autonomous, connected, electric and shared. Like we've been talking about this for 10 years and agency model, which kind of happened and then didn't happen and then happened and then sort of rolled back. So I think for me, there's always going to be a need for a car with a driver in it, depending on where you are. But I also think there's a definite need for that autonomous, the robo taxi thing has been a real success when you need to have a vehicle just sort of there and when you need it without a driver. And one of the guests earlier on said there's a real shortage of drivers. So actually in buses, weirdly, so they're looking at how do you think about mobile cities and connected cities. And I think that's a really interesting kind of use case about how we connect all of this up. You're right. Which platform is it going to sit on? What do you do with it all? So I think it's, are you working, Peter, with like government as well? Do you have to work with regulators or other entities, or has that not kind of come into your spaceship when you're thinking about autonomous vehicles and the design of them?
We are discussing with governments. I think some of them are trying to figure out like how they can use the data in the best way. But also the interesting thing about the governments is like from the fleet side, it's easy because you can just, if I own a fleet, I can just give consent.
Yes.
But for the government, though, it's with like millions of consumers, it's a whole different ball game of being able to get them all to consent to give their data. And maybe it's just easier for them to consent and use the government in that way. But I think to the earlier point, though, it's interesting because like what it means to own a car is fundamentally changing. And our part to play in this is we view from the data as turning a vehicle from a liability into an asset. So on the EV side, going back to like 2 years ago at Move, the whole thing was like smart charging, virtual power plants, etc. And all that means is that I can now plug my car into the grid and start earning money back from it. And then the question then, and that's like one way of recovering, turning it from a liability to an asset. And the other way is, well, if I'm owning a vehicle and renting it out during the day, well, then does that mean eventually I'll actually earn more money from my car than I will from losing it? But we'll find out, I guess. This is the
exciting thing.
You can tell I talk tomorrow and find out.
I know. I'm like, oh yes, I will. Definitely I will. Listen, Peter, thank you so much. You know, you were definitely worth waiting for a year. And I could have found you last year. I was like, we should talk to you. And it's been a real sort of pleasure actually bringing the podcast here to Move because we want to showcase innovation and what's coming. So it's been great to speak to you finally. And thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for having us on board. It's fantastic here.